Hey folks, thanks for joining me. I thought, with all the questions I've been getting online about RedNet and all the progress that Power Crystal's Minefactory Reloaded has been making, I thought I would take a moment to just maybe do a couple of basic tutorials on how you can use RedNet in a practical way to make real builds. So, let's get started with some basic discussions. Now, the focus of this is not to cover the mod exhaustively, but it's here to focus on what can we do with the mod practically. RedNet is such a huge topic that actually I don't even really understand all of it yet. But I do understand how to use it in a practical sense, and I know how to teach myself to use more. And I'm hoping that if you're confused by it, then maybe I can help you understand more about it so that you can be in the same place. Well, for starters, we need to know the basics of RedNet, and the very first thing we're going to talk about is the RedNet cable. Now, this is the recipe for RedNet cable. It uses plastic sheets, which, if you understand Minefactory Reloaded, you will see are simple to make. And it will make a fairly large amount of cable for a very small amount of redstone and not too much plastic. So you should have no problem manufacturing this stuff. And when you put it down, it looks a little unremarkable, right? But don't be deceived. There's actually a ton of potential in this cable. It actually is carrying a ton of information and can be carrying up to 256 channels at once. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about using it at the very beginning. What I'm going to do first is show you, this is a glowstone illuminator, which is basically a lamp from thermal expansion. And we could set it so that it's got all sorts of interesting modes. The default mode we're going to put it on is just the default. If it gets a redstone signal, it will turn on. So, like any redstone cabling or just plain redstone, if we were to run a cable in and then place a switch nearby, right? You can see this little paddle here represents it's listening to the state. It knows to listen, RedNet knows to listen to the state. We can turn on the lamp, and we can turn off the lamp. Simple, right? And it turns out that really, if you just want to get started and just use this as a convenient tool for passing along redstone signals, you can, because this is really all there is to the basic cable mode. Turns them all on. Other fun facts, the cable never, ever, ever lets power go. Like the redstone level never drops. So you can just have as much you can run it as far as you want. It doesn't bleed out power into surrounding blocks. It pushes it right in very specifically like that. So you can run this for thousands of blocks. If you have them all chunk loaded, you will be able to pass redstone signals for thousands of blocks. So far, it's a lot like Red Power 2's bundled cables. But since Red Power 2 isn't available for 1.5, and if it does come out, will probably be come out again. It will probably only be available for Red Power, like for Minecraft 1.6 at this rate. So this is what we have right now. Now, the next thing to show you about this, and this is different from Red Power 2, and this is an interesting point, is that there are all sorts of fun different modes in here. You'll notice these tiny little white bands here, and you'll notice this kind of white paddle here. So if I were to click this with my wrench, and any wrench any wrench that works with the Minefactory Reloaded protocol will do. This is thermal expansion, or it's the Omni wrench, but you can use the the precision sledgehammer, or they're given the crescent hammer. Most Buildcraft wrenches will work too. So let's just talk about what I just did there. I right-clicked and it changed color. I could do this several times, right? I go dick, 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 and all these things change color. What this does, well, first let's just flip the switch. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. What the heck does that mean? So the cable is actually carrying 16. Well, you see, it's got all the colors, right? It's got all the colors. You can cycle through all of them, right? And we go back to white, some of these come on. Are you catching a pattern? What happens if I were to click here? Oh, well, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. We'll talk about that in a sec. Spoilers. Right. So this is, now you'll notice that this has a kind of a pinkish or magenta output, and this has a this has a white output, and that one's on, right? So what we're actually doing here is selecting the sub-channel. So each one of these inputs and all the outputs can be tied to a specific color. And the color, everything is an input and an output, and the color is set at the input level and is set at the output level. So at the very same time that we are doing this, right, we can also, let's just put another switch right here. Now note this one's white. Now that one's on. Let's just add another piece of cable here, and let's set that to, how about blue, right? So now we can independently manipulate all of these things, right? And it doesn't have to, it doesn't work. Now, what if I were to put one way over here, we'd have a similar situation, right? It doesn't matter how you set up the network. It cares about the colors of the outputs. And you know that there's no visual updates to the cables or anything to let you know what's happening. So it's helpful to craft one of these RedNet meters, and that will show you white is at 15, all of the RedNet subnets are at 0. That's a right click. Once again, with the RedNet meter, now turning on the purple. White and magenta are at 15, all your subnets are at 0. Now let me explain what that is telling you. When you right click, it will look at this piece of RedNet cable, and it will look at the levels of each subchannel. Now, the Minecraft 1.5 stuff changed the way that, well, it didn't really change, but sort of emphasized the way that redstone works, and then there's all sorts of different levels that RedNet or that redstone signals can be at, from 0 to 16. So 0 is off, 16 is max on, and it kind of fades over time. Now, we'd always seen that working, but now is a little bit different because, you know, you can actually use there's different tools like the redstone comparator and other things that are a little out of scope for this conversation, but you know, they're interesting stuff, and you can do interesting logic, and we'll talk about that in a later segment because RedNet can manipulate those too. However, in this case, all it's telling us is which subnets actually have a signal. Now, you can have one cable and you can do all sorts of things. As you can see, this one cable network is manipulating 2 channels, and we can make it manipulate 3. Let's look for just a moment at one other neat new feature of RedNet cable. This is pretty new. It's a little buggy still because it's still in the very early betas, but it's a very powerful feature. Now, as you saw, if I lay down some cable, give it a switch, I can now, because it's the input and the output are mapped to white, light and unlight this block. Sometimes you don't want to send a signal to a block. Now, you could change the color, but if you're using your RedNet cable to its maximum potential, you're using all your colors, and you don't want to give one up as a dead channel just not to talk to blocks. Power Crystal heard the Resonant Rise folks talking about this and added a feature for us, which I'm very excited about. You can right-click the center red target of a piece of RedNet cable and change the connection mode. This default connection mode is the normal. It talks to blocks it knows about and then will kind of listen on mod blocks. This is the force connection mode, which does everything that the normal connection mode does. And then there's the no connection mode. No connection mode means that it won't accidentally talk to your blocks unless if you don't want to. But it will connect to other pieces of cable, and they could be on. So here we can see that that block is on, but this block isn't. Cool, right? Before I show you a more practical build, what I'd like to do is show you just another example, just to really drive home how flexible this cable is. As you can see, I've got a wall of glowstone illuminators here with a single redstone block to power this one to show you what it looks like. Now, if you see peeking over here, I have a line that I've run all the way over to the other side. Let's go ahead and put a block of redstone on there, which turns them all on because it is obviously powering. If we look down here, we'll see that it's set on the white channel. And if we were to look up here, we'll see that all but one of them are also set to the white channel. So that's what's going on there. I've also got a blocker over here, and if I were to put a switch on it, and you can see I've already preset it to the orange channel, and just throw the switch. Right. Of course, were I to change this channel to any other color, well, or rotate this thing, and then if I were to hit them like so, that of course would not turn on the light. It only works for the orange channel. So why don't I show you how to do something more practical with this than just turn on and off lights. So we've got these standard thermal expansion machines that use mine joules. Got a few in there. This is a pulverizer configured to output to a powered furnace. Using vanilla hopper as a feeder, this is a pretty much bog standard way for an early game ore processor. And frequently in early game ore processors, what you want to do is feed it power. And oftentimes you don't have anything but conductive pipes on hand. You could connect the engines directly, but this is sort of a pain and also inefficient. So what we've done here is what we do in every case. We just run some power lines over. This is probably too many, but it's really just here to make a point. Now, we have some Stirling engines here with blocks of coal coke that can really produce a lot of mine joules. And if we look back here, we've attached RedNet cable on the white subnet to them. To activate these, we would run a cable all the way over here. Oh look, I already have. Let's just put down a few more blocks, right? And let's go ahead and run a RedNet cable right here. And let's just break through the wall right here and lay one more piece of cable. We would put a switch right here. And now that's also on the white subnet, and it's listening because it has the paddle. If we look over here, we'll start to see these engines warming up and turning on, which is, of course, fantastic. You do want to be careful, and we'll talk in a future episode about ways that you can be careful not to blow up these pipes, besides not using them, which is probably the best call. So with this switch, we can turn on and off our engines, right? And this isn't the most efficient way to do it, but this is a way you can do it. So that's a pretty standard way to do it. It makes sense, straightforward. Let's say for a second that from way over here, by the way, cool wand, right? You wanted to turn on and off this hopper. Remember, vanilla hoppers can be disabled via a redstone signal. Let's do that too. We can just bring it over here. Now, you'll note, you have to be careful. Don't let your switches, which power lots of things, crosstalk, right? So they have to be separated a little bit, otherwise they can end up crosstalking. Particularly, this switch could end up powering this hopper and disabling the pass-through of items. So let's go ahead and put down another switch here, and let's change its color to be orange. Now, let's sneak over behind this hopper, which should be right here, right? Yes. And let's add a piece of cable. We'll set it to forced connection mode, set its color to orange, and then we'll finish connecting it to the network. Now, if we were to turn this on and check with our trusty RedNet, white and orange are at 15, which means that this hopper should be receiving a redstone signal. If I were to put things in, you will note that they will not pass through into the pulverizer. However, if I turn it off, you will note that they are now leaving and draining into the pulverizer. Once again, we can stop it, and it will just work. Fantastic, right? Fantastic, I think so. So this is an example of just RedNet cable. I'll start going into the RedNet controller in a little bit, and the RedNet controller is awesome and lets you do even more amazing things. But before we can talk about that, we really shouldn't underestimate how awesome the cable is. Thanks for tuning in. Give me a like and a sub if you want me to keep doing this sort of thing.